Good afternoon and welcome to you. I'm going to be looking at a criminal case, really, a bit unusual for me, really, but it's something that I read a book about and was very interested in it, actually. And it's a case that is 40 years old. It's about a man called Jeremy Bamber, who killed several people, members of his own family, at the White House farm. In 1985, the 24-year-old Jeremy Bamber murdered his adoptive parents, his adopted sister, and her 6-year-old twins in a place called Tolshund Darcy, Essex, on August the 7th, 1985. Neville Bamber, his adopted father, was a fit 61-year-old farmer who stood over 6 foot tall. He was strongly built. Jeremy Bamber murdered them all, it was found at the trial. And after wrestling his father, apparently, according to the prosecution, he beat him and he then shot him. Jeremy Bamber has a whole life sentence. However, and this is the interesting thing, after 40 years, he still maintains he is 100% innocent. And there have been several appeals, not least of which there is one in 2025. Jeremy Bamber maintains, that his mentally ill sister, Sheila, did the crime. So Sheila murdered her own twin boys, 6 years old, murdered her adopted parents, and was the murderer. In 2025, he alleges that Essex Police accidentally shot his sister's corpse because she was found with the rifle, holding the rifle that had killed the people. It had been shot, however, his sister had been shot twice. Before blaming the killing on him to cover it up. And so basically, he claims that the police shot, Sheila was shot once, he claims, and then the police later shot the corpse again, blaming the killings on him to cover up their misadventure, if you like. The two shots and the silencer, the rifle had a silencer attached to it, ballistics experts say could not have been used by his sister to shoot herself. In other words, she was shot twice by Bamber. Sheila, his sister, did have mental health problems. She was a paranoid schizophrenic, or we'd call her today bipolar. The interesting thing is her fingernails were spotless, and her feet, she was shot in bed, and her feet were pristine. This was not a woman who'd been involved in any sort of struggle. If she'd have struggled, and somebody did struggle, whether it was Bamber or Sheila, if she had have struggled with Neville to subdue him, she'd have had to be extremely strong. Now, people tell me that people with bipolar can be incredibly strong. Well, if that was the case, her fingernails and her feet and her body would have shown severe signs of a struggle, because clearly Neville Bamber was in a bad way and had struggled with his killer, whoever that was. She'd have struggled to subdue Neville. He was a tall man, well built, a fit farmer. People who know her would say that despite her mental health problems, she'd have never harmed her twins. Bamber, police believe, staged the scene after he'd killed the whole family. Sheila had a rifle bullet in the neck and one through the chin, which went into her brain. It was inconceivable, said the prosecution, that she'd actually shot herself. The police investigation wasn't the best. I think it's fair to say that. And police practice wasn't as thorough as it could have been. Now, that wasn't unusual in the 1980s. And I'm not excusing the police in any way. But to accuse the Essex Police of shooting his sister's corpse again is a bizarre claim for Bamber to make. Bamber, interestingly enough, has had several appeals turned down and is serving a whole life term. Famously, at the funerals of his family, he appeared to manufacture grief and showed crocodile tears at the funerals, and his behaviour before his arrest was more about how much money he could get, and he didn't seem to be unduly upset at all. It was more about what he could get rather than the grief or the loss he was experiencing. So there's a whole range of questions here about Jeremy Bamber, and I'll just pose those because I know this separates people. People feel it could have been Sheila and people feel it could have been Jeremy. How could Sheila, his sister, how could she overpower Neville and her hands and her feet show no signs, and her body show no signs of a struggle? Her fingernails would have been very, very dirty, and the soles of her feet would have been dirty, blood-stained, and so on. They were pristine, as were her fingernails, as were her hands. Yes, manic schizophrenics can be incredibly strong, but her body wasn't dirty and affected by struggle in any way. June Bamber, Neville's wife, was a committed Christian, but wasn't unduly harsh on Sheila, no more so than a born-again Christian of the period would probably have been. She wasn't desperately keen on Sheila's role as a model, and then the fact that she'd had twins, but equally so, Sheila's illness was neither here nor there in one sense. The twin boys were very much part of the whole family. They were 6-year-old twins, and they were part of that family. What's the motive? Well, Jeremy's motive, according to the trial, partly was greed. He wanted to inherit a substantial sum of money. Neville Bamber and the farm and the property, he was reasonably well off. He would have stood to have inherited a substantial sum of money and property. Jeremy was manipulative. He used cannabis and alcohol extensively, and he confessed to his long-term girlfriend quite a well-structured plan to kill the whole family so that he could claim the family's money and property. The rifle and the silencer was found after the event and showed signs of paint, similar paint to paint in the kitchen. So it showed that there was a struggle. The silencer had been taken off, but then it was found in the building. The rifle and silencer that was used, it was used by a fairly skilled and proficient person. Now, Sheila hadn't got extensive shooting experience. She had shot a little bit, but it was a very occasional thing, whereas Jeremy had shot regularly on the farm. When the police got there, it was a cold-blooded murder scene. It is highly unlikely Sheila would have murdered her twin boys, sleeping as they were. She cared for them as well as any mother would do. So you can have mental health problems, but it doesn't make you into a psychopathic killer. The means. Jeremy was familiar with the property. It was shown how he could get in and out and let himself in and out through a window. He was familiar with shooting. He was familiar with using ammunition. He was familiar with the use of that particular rifle. He was a skilled firearms user. Opportunity. The family were all together that night, and he knew the property intimately. He disliked his sister, and he wouldn't wanted to have shared the inheritance with her. As I say, there was extensive property holdings, and there was extensive money to be had. He exhibited a form of narcissistic behaviour, and his moral compass was not very clear. That moral compass was flipping around all over the place, not helped by his extensive cannabis and alcohol use. He was greedy, and his hatred seemed to be his motive, and a greed that wanted to possess that money and property. His motive on that summer night was those things: greed and wanting to inherit early. And he confessed this to his girlfriend, and a very well-formed plan it was too. Now, people say because she was spurned by Bamber that she turned against him. But when she was questioned, the plan that Bamber had put to her seemed to be a very well thought through one indeed. Yes, there were police errors, the way it was handled, the way that evidence, blood spatter, scenes of crime, it wouldn't have been done like that today. I feel fairly confident that Jeremy Bamber killed his mother and father who had adopted him, his sister Sheila, and the twin boys as they slept. With Neville Bamber, the farmer, the dad, there was a struggle. And this is where we have a problem with Sheila's corpse. She showed absolutely no sign of a struggle whatsoever. I know this will elicit quite strong points of view from people looking at this video. Please feel free to like and subscribe to my channel, and please make your comments known. I'll open up the comments box, so if you want to make comments, I know it does people have told very strong views about this, but I feel fairly sure that it is a safe prosecution, and that Bamber did the deed. Okay, thanks very much, and God bless you all.